Hey guys, this is part 2 of my 3-part retrospective on the animated Batman films that I recorded with my friends John, Chris, and Jeremy. In part 1 of this video, we discussed Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero, Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, Batman Mystery of the Batwoman, and the Batman vs. Dracula. In this part of the retrospective, we'll be discussing Batman Gotham Knight, Superman/Batman Public Enemies, Superman/Batman Apocalypse, Batman Under the Red Hood, Batman Year One, and the 2-part Dark Knight Returns movie. And for this retrospective, I decided to leave out the animated Justice League movies, mainly because I haven't seen all of them, and also I felt like that would make this longer than it needs to be. So once again, this is part 2 of this retrospective, but if you haven't already, go check out part 1, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. Now we move on to Batman Gotham Knight, which came out in 2008, and this was the first Batman film of the DC original animated films, I believe. Now this is an anthology film consisting of 6 animated shorts, and Kevin Conroy returns to play the voice of Batman, but this is not in continuity with Batman the Animated Series. I heard this is supposed to be in the same universe as Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, but I don't buy that for a second. But apparently it's supposed to be like in between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. I don't personally buy it as actually being part of that continuity. But what do you guys think of this movie, and do you think it could count as part of that universe?
Yeah, it can. I mean, if you want it to, but I could take or leave it personally. They're going for that aesthetic, that Nolan aesthetic of like ultra real. Okay, this is definitely taking place in our world, the real world, not like the DC universe. But it's for me, it's just really bland. There's nothing that I really see of any kind of substance in it. I kind of hate the way they did Deadshot too. He's a little bit of a wuss in this one. Crispus being put into it was good. I like that part because he's like an underutilized character. Like even Gotham dropped him after like half a season. But yeah, I mean it's I guess fun to watch, but there's nothing really. There's not a whole lot to chew on with it.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out about this is there are 2 segments in this movie that do stand out to me. The first segment is called Have I Got a Story for You? And this is actually based on a Batman comic from the 70s called The Batman Nobody Knows, which was actually adapted into an episode of the new Batman Adventures called, what was it called again?
Legends of the Dark Knight.
Yeah, Legends of the Dark Knight, thank you, John. And then there's another segment of this movie about 2 cops caught in a gang shootout that I thought was pretty good. But overall, the other stories are kind of forgettable to me. What do you think of this movie?
It's been a long while since I've seen it, and I just, I remember thinking it was alright. I really didn't love it. And as far as it being in connection with the Dark Knight trilogy, I don't think it is. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it. Isn't Killer Croc in this movie?
Yeah, I believe so.
But that kind of villain, I don't think would fit into Christopher Nolan's, more grounded, realistic version of Batman. Plus, I believe also, isn't Detective Ramirez in this movie?
I think so.
Yeah,
briefly, yeah.
Yeah, again, but she's also in The Dark Knight, and in The Dark Knight, she's very opposed to Batman, whereas here she's kind of a supporter. That does not make any sense. Yeah, that does not mesh well.
That's true.
I wouldn't say I hate this one. I just didn't really like. I agree with Chris. It's just bland with good animation, and seeing Kevin Conroy come back as Batman was pretty cool because it had been like 2 years since Justice League went off the air, and yeah, there's really not really much I can say about this other than the fact that it's just like 6 store, and I agree with you. Like the second store was pretty decent, and the rest of it's just like forgetful. It's just nothing really much else to add to it. It's just and. Because I remember when I first saw it, I thought it was going to be like a Christopher Nolan like spin-off to like the Dark Knight trilogy. I'm like, this is pretty cool, but when I saw it, it was not what I expected. I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on here?
Actually, there is one other story that does kind of stand out to me, and it's the one where it flashes back to Bruce Wayne training with like this Indian woman. Yeah. I thought that was kind of interesting.
It was, but I just felt like there could have been like a little bit more. They maybe a little bit longer. It could have been better, but.
Yeah, I do remember seeing a commercial for this movie many years ago, and it definitely was advertised as being taking place between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and it just, I don't think it fits in very well with those movies.
Yeah, there's really not much else to say about this. I think it's an alright film. I don't think it's great, but it's decent, I would say.
Actually, I would say that it actually works well as an advertisement for the Batman anthologies, like Legends of the Dark Knight, Black and White. Those are really good stories that really consistently switch up like the writers and the art style, much like the movie does. The problem is the movie just kind of sucks at it. So definitely check those out if this kind of left you wanting more. Yeah.
All right. Sounds like you hated this the most out of all of us.
Yeah, I really could just really take it or leave it. I'm not into it at all. I was kind of disappointed by it.
So it's hard. Like some of the scenes you see, like the way like Bruce Wayne looks in this movie, it's hard to believe that's Bruce Wayne. It doesn't like feel like Bruce Wayne. It feels like something from a different like anime show.
Yeah, well, it is a very anime-influenced movie. Now we come to Superman and Batman Public Enemies, which came out in 2009, and this features the voice of Kevin Conroy coming back to play the voice of Batman, and Tim Daly playing the voice of Superman, and Clancy Brown playing the voice of Lex Luthor, and they all played those voices in Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series, but this is not in continuity with either of those series. This is actually based on a Jeff Loeb comic, but I never read that comic. I thought this movie was alright, but what do you boys think of this?
It's actually pretty faithful to the comic, even in just the art style. That was the first thing I really appreciated of it. But the thing that was always so great about it was about the dynamic between Bruce and Clark. It was like hope versus fear, like aspiration versus cynicism. And that's really cool, like, dynamics to explore, especially in, like, a superhero story where these people are supposed to be inspirational and, like, idealistic. It's a cool thing to kind of go between, okay, here's how he operates, here's how he operates, and this is the gray space in between when they work together. And it's great that Lex is the villain too, because he's a really good thing to bounce off both of them, because he's a very idealistic person who believes the ends justify the means. He's almost like somewhere in between the two. So I like the way that he mirrors like that dynamic just by being one person rather than another two villains, because you'd think that's what they would do if it was Batman facing off against Superman. I guess you could say like Waller counts as like a second villain, but it's good that it's just Lex. He works really well, and I'm really shocked that it's very faithful to the comic book, but it's also very good at the same time. A lot of times when they do straight up just like page to page adaptations, it doesn't really work. But this actually it replicated it pretty well. So good on it for that, because a lot of times they just end up bland when they do it straight up.
Yeah, I like this film a lot. I think it definitely shows... I do like how it kind of shows Lex Luthor giving Superman a big run for his money because, at the beginning of the movie, everything is chaos, and, the economy is destroyed and all that, and Lex Luthor pretty much just comes and fixes it. And Superman, knowing Lex Luthor to be the complete scumbag that he is, just can't, bring himself to say, yeah, he did a good job, he fixed everything. So, I kind of like that a bit. It's like, Superman's kind of forced into this position where he's like, he almost sort of has to, he's being pressured to bow down to someone who has been his greatest enemy for so long. And I also like Batman just constantly trying to, get Clark to, go down to his level, So he's like, you have to sometimes do things my way, So yeah, it's a great movie.
Yeah, I agree. I love this movie. What I like about this film is like the chemistry of Tim Daly, Kevin Conroy. They're just like every time I read the comic, they're the first two that come to mind of playing Batman and Superman. I also love I like the idea that how like just because like Lex Luthor is president, it does not mean that he can be trusted. Like just because he's like doing good, does that mean can Superman trust him like 100%? No, of course not, because who knows what like Lex Luthor's doing behind closed door that could be like top secret and very like diabolic and evil. And I also do you remember like the cemetery scene with Metallo and that was like I in a way the way Metallo looked like Terminator but with a kryptonite in his stomach.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just like I said, I love how Superman is kind of trying to, you could say he's kind of trying to look on the bright side, even though they're in that dire situation. But Batman is just kind of just, bringing him back down to reality. It's like his attitude is basically, yeah, we're fucked. And it's just hilarious to see the two of them play off each other like that.
Yeah, it definitely seems like you guys like this a little more than I did. I liked this, but my issue with it is it kind of didn't know whether it wanted to be for adults or kids, because there was some stuff in this movie that I thought was really childish, like, okay, the meteor being destroyed by a giant toy robot built by a Japanese kid. I frankly found that to be very juvenile, but that would be fine if this was like a straight up kids film, but then you have all the cursing and a lot of the political stuff in the movie, so it's like, it almost didn't really know what it wanted to be. Oh yeah, and then Power Girl.
played by Allison Mack from Smallville.
Yeah.
I can actually can agree with you on that one. Even though I do love this film, maybe that's like the only like part I didn't like in the film was that how old was it, like the kid, like 8 or 7 years old maybe, or
I think he was 12.
oh yeah, some like 12-year-old designing like a big. I think it would have worked better if it was just like maybe like a scientist instead of a 12-year-old kid. That would have made a lot more sense.
Yes, well, Christian, I just want to somewhat counter your point about the movie being too juvenile by saying there's plenty of, dark stuff, and not just dark. There's also that scene towards the end where, Batman and Superman are, talking with the kid who built the robot, and either Batman or Superman asks, will it work? And the kid just goes, does Power Girl have big? And then he's cut off. So there are definitely some adult jokes in there.
That was a really good switch up of the line from the book where they joke around that if they want Toymaker to do what they wanted to do, they can just go have Power Girl have a conversation with him. It was like a distillation of that joke. But what you're talking about is kind of the divide between, okay, what's ridiculous and what can we take seriously? And that, I think, the problem is, it's kind of a matter of opinion and whether or not they nailed it. Me, personally, I think they did, because, like I said, it's a pretty straight adaptation of the book, and I like the book a lot.
What Jeremy was talking about, that's kind of part of my problem with it, is you have all the adult humor, but then it's like, I'm sorry, the whole thing at the end, it's like, that it's just too childish for me to take it seriously in a generally pretty serious story.
I mean, I can understand that point, and I just want to add one more little thing. I just love the part where the Toyman says, "Oh yeah, and tell Power Girl I'm sorry for the X-ray glasses."
I forgot about that line, actually.
She's her own movie at this point. They need to address the issues with that character.
Actually, when you think about it, also remember like when Solomon Grundy and also some like other like Justice League members like trying to like capture Superman, like. I thought it was funny they had, like, when I think it was either Batman or Superman says to Solomon Grundy, like, wait a minute, why would you want to capture me for money? Because, like, because when you think about it, Solomon Grundy could care less about money.
Yeah, he's a zombie.
Yeah, exactly.
I do want to point out, I really like CCH Pounder as the voice of Amanda Waller, and I actually think she would make a really good live-action Amanda Waller.
I agree. She'd be great.
Yeah, I definitely agree. CCH Pounder, she delivers her lines with such a blunt form of authority and power, like, I'm the boss, you're gonna listen to me, and she delivers her lines so well.
Compared to, like, Viola Davis, I feel like she had more of, like, a nasty attitude than Viola Davis in the Suicide Squad film, if you think about it.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about Lex Luthor, and, I just always love watching his slow descent into madness over the course of this film. At the beginning, he's evil, obviously, but he's still a sane type of evil. Over the course of the movie, he just keeps going down this downward spiral into deranged, lunacy, madness, pretty much. And, I always wonder, how do you go from wanting to blow that meteor sky high to then treating it like a godsend? It's like, what happened in your mind there? What happened in the interim? And, I love when he really is losing it, and he just, he's with Amanda Waller, and he just goes, oh yes, that meteor was a godsend. I'm going to create a new world order, and I'm going to need someone to share it with. He says something like that, and then he tries to get romantic with her, and I'm like, wow, that's quite another development in your character there, Lex.
The funny thing about that is, like, they'd be a very scary couple.
They would.
Like, they should do that at some point in the DCU, because, like, that'd be the most insane team-up ever, the two of them together.
Yeah.
I agree.
Now, technically, the next movie to come out was Under the Red Hood, but we're going to do that after this one. Chris here suggested that we talk about Apocalypse before that, because Superman / Batman Apocalypse is a direct sequel to Public Enemies. And this one is also based on a Jeff Loeb comic. I never read it, so I can't say how true this is to the comic, but this is also a retelling of Supergirl's origin. And it's been a while since I've seen this one, but I actually remember liking this one a little bit better than Public Enemies, but honestly, I would have to rewatch both movies. But Chris, what do you think of this one?
First off, actually, yeah, it's just as faithful as Public Enemies was. Public Enemies took a lot from Ed McGuinness's artwork and put it into the animation. This took a lot from Michael Turner's artwork and put it into the animation. My only problem with it is that it shouldn't be called Apocalypse. It should be called something like Last Daughter, because it really is Supergirl's story, I think, first and foremost. And that dynamic from Public Enemies between Clark and Bruce, that plays into how she becomes Supergirl. What should we do with her? How should we address the fact that there's another Kryptonian running around? I found that really interesting, the idea of okay, let's take these two different perspectives and see how it bleeds into them, bringing up another superhero. And then the fact that Apocalypse does play into the story with Darkseid and Harbinger and all that, it's really cool, and a really cool reinterpretation of how Kara becomes Supergirl. My only issue with it, I think, is honestly it goes different places, slightly more darker places with Kara's origin, which I like, but at the same time I feel like it was kind of trying too hard to up the ante a little bit. But I did appreciate that Kara does have a better moment in this where she kind of becomes herself and realizes she's got to do her own thing. I think it's the moment when her and Darkseid are fighting at the Kent farm, and he's everything you became is because of us. And she goes, well, then I'm not going to be what you wanted me to be. That's my choice. That was a really good moment. I don't remember that being in the comics, so that was a cool change up that they did. So yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. I just didn't like that in terms of marketing, it kind of ignored the fact that Supergirl was kind of the main focus. That was kind of lame.
I like this movie too, not as much as Public Enemies, but I still think it's very good. I do like Supergirl's, story throughout the movie, how she's adjusting to life on Earth, and, the opposition she faces predominantly from Batman, who, as usual, is very paranoid. And I enjoy it. I'm not a big fan of the animation, though. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's just something about it I'm just not a big fan of.
I actually like the animation. It wasn't that bad, but because this was a tribute to
Michael Turner.
Michael Turner, because he passed away around the time the film came out, and I enjoy this. When I saw this, I was blown away. Wow, this just got better and better. It makes you wish that there could have been more. But at the same time, you told me before that after this, the rest of the comic book series were just not the best. With these Public Enemy and Apocalypse were the best of the series.
It was just called Supergirl. They called the arc, and then obviously they changed it for the movie.
I also liked Susan Eisenberg coming back as Wonder Woman, because she's one of my favorite actors to play a woman up there with Gal Gadot and Kerry Russell from the Wonder Woman animated film. And the ending scene, when they fight at the Kent farm, that was an awesome battle. And actually, when you think about it, they pay a little tribute to Smallville when you think about it, because Smallville was a really popular show at that time. And I also like some of the scenes when Clark and Kara are going shopping, where he's trying to show her what the life of a human life is how we just we're just boring people. We get up, we go to work, or maybe sometimes we go shopping once in a while. Have hot dogs in the stands, and even though it's minor stuff, but still, it's nice to see character development, close bonding relationship with cousins, and I also like the train when they're training Kara to be being prepared what's to come with if the case there's other an apocalypse come, or depending on whatever future battles are going to come. And I was oh man, it's been a while since I've seen this. So I wanted to watch this when we were doing this podcast, but I just didn't have the time. But it's definitely a great one. Definitely one I watch again and again. And that and Public Enemies back to back. They're just so phenomenal. It makes me forget about Batman versus Superman.
They're a really good double feature.
Yeah, I agree. They are a good double feature. I think they go well hand in hand. And yeah, I think they're great. I do just want to add on to my point about Batman's paranoia. In one of the earlier scenes where Supergirl is kind of still adjusting, and she's in the Batcave, and she's learning the language, and she just destroys Batman's computer. Superman is still kind of trying to calm Batman down and say, oh, she's my cousin, she doesn't mean anyone any harm, and Batman just bluntly goes, your cousin just torched all that money's worth of hardware.
I know what you're going to say.
And then Superman says, oh, I'll pay for it, and he just goes, on a reporter's salary? And I'm like, Clark, in the game of wits, you are outbeat.
Like Bruce, like having no problem with just like being elitist in that moment. Like, yeah, you don't make as much as I do. I'm a billionaire.
Yeah, that he just like owned Superman in that scene.
And I just love Supergirl's nickname for him, Grumpy Ass. Yeah, I didn't suspect that. She like says something to Superman about and calls him Grumpy Ass, and Superman's just like, Grumpy Ass is actually a lot nicer when you get to know him. And even though he's trying to defend Batman, the fact that he's using the name is it's priceless.
It just occurred to me that actually plays up this kind of underlying thing about Batman and the DCU, where like people are very gung ho. All the superheroes in the DCU, they're like, yeah, I'll fight Darkseid, man. I'll fight anybody. But then somebody brings up Batman, they go, no, Batman scares me. Like it's a cool like undercurrent that like people are just afraid of him because they don't know what to make of him. They're like very frightened of him. So yeah, I like that joke too.
Yeah, but there is also the serious part of it. Like when she says to Batman, when you were coming, I thought I could hear you, because of your heartbeat, but you have no heart. And, that is actually a very sad, emotional line.
I do want to point out something.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I agree with this. This is something some guys were pointing out in a podcast once, but I thought this joke was really funny. Batman's always such a whiny bitch about his parents, but Superman has more of a reason to be a whiny bitch because Superman's entire fucking species died.
That is a really good point.
That is a good point. Yeah, I could agree.
I mean, yeah, to an extent I agree, although we have to remember that he was still raised by some very good people on Earth.
Kind of as a prelude to the Justice League feature we're going to do in the summer, one of my favorite Batman moments in animation was in Crisis on Two Earths, which Batman fights like an evil version of himself from another universe. And it's funny you brought up he's a whiny bitch about his parents, because there's a really good moment where Owlman has decided that he's going to like wipe out the multiverse and stuff, but like they kind of subtly hint it's because he feels there's no meaning in anything. So Bruce says to him, when the two of us looked into the abyss, you're the one who blinked. I like this. Admittedly, like everything goes back to what happened to his parents, but I do like that he's very stern about, suck it up. That's just his dynamic with Clark.
So next I want to talk about 2010's Batman Under the Red Hood. Now this is actually based on a Batman story arc called Under the Hood by Judd Wennick, and I've never read the comic, so I really can't comment too much on it, but this also seems to take some stuff from Batman the Killing Joke and A Death in the Family. But what do you guys think of this movie?
It's really fantastic. It does take liberties with how Red Hood is back and all that stuff. There's a lot of changes. I don't think Ra's and the League really played much of a part in the original story. But the fact that it does Jason's return so well, and it also kind of, with that opening scene, it kind of plays in a little bit of Death in the Family. I like the way that it did that. And how just how this affected every member of the Bat family. Dick turns up, and they mention Barbara and all that stuff. And Bruce Greenwood is a fantastic Batman. I think I hope he does it again at some point, because I think he really nails that kind of gruff dynamic. Also, something that John brought up while we were on the way is who's the voice of Joker in this?
John DiMaggio.
John DiMaggio from Futurama. I really like what he did with it, because when people go to do a Joker voice, it's always kind of nasally. You know what I mean? They always go for that weird, kind of slightly dorky feel to it. But he kind of just does himself, but a very fucking psycho version of himself. And I think he kind of nails it. He brought something very different that nobody had done before. And I liked his Joker a lot for that reason.
One of my favorite moments is when Black Mask is talking to him, and he's eating chips, and he just goes, "May I have a glass of water?" And then when he takes the water, he just smashes it and slices the henchman's necks up.
I think my favorite line in it is, "I'm gonna need some new guards because these guys are kind of dead." That was really good. But I'm glad you brought up Black Mask, because I think he's probably the most, at least just in my opinion, he's the most underrated Batman villain, and he's utilized really well here. He's one of the characters I regret never showed up in the animated series, because he's really cool. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I love this movie. I think it's fantastic, and I love, like in Mask of the Phantasm, it has a real emotional depth to it, you know. The opening credits alone, just, you know, you can see it from there, you know, it's dark, it's raining, there's a crow on a gravestone, and the, you know, sad music that perfectly sets the tone for the movie. And yeah, I think the cast is great. Bruce Greenwood, I think he did voice Batman again after this.
Gaslight.
Yeah, he's great. And I love John DiMaggio as the Joker. I think he does a fantastic job. I think during the opening scene, before the credits, you know, when he's beating Jason Todd, you know, that's, I think, where his voice might have creeped me out the most, because I just love how he's taking absolute joy in this horrendous act that he's doing. And not only is he doing that, but he's trying to, you know, get, like, a response from Jason Todd, you know, by saying things like, oh, you know, maybe I should teach you, you know, the right thing to do. Like when he says, you know, that was just rude. The first boy blunder at least had some manners. Like he's, you know, he's mocking him like that. And, you know, especially when I love how when he's hitting him with the crowbar, he just says, which do you think hurt more? A or B? Forehand or backhand? You know, I mean, he's just having so much fun with it. And I think that's just, it's both horrifying and very entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I agree. This film is just... I didn't read the comic before I saw this. I saw this before I read the comic, and when I saw this movie, I was like, oh my god, I want to read the comic. I just blew my mind away. I didn't know, like, what to expect, like, the twists, the turns, especially, like, knowing who the Red Hood was. I'm like, what? I love John DiMaggio as the Joker. I would love to see him again play the Joker, and he reminded me of, like, Heath Ledger. I do love that scene, like, when Black Mass is asking questions. I couldn't, like, stop, like, I mean, not, like, laughing, like, how it was fun. It was just, like, how great it was. It was just so, like, well done, the way he did that scene. And Bruce Greenwood, definitely another actor I love who played Batman. I hope to see him a few more times. If Conroy retires, I guess Bruce Greenwood could be the new Batman actor. And one of my other favorite scenes, remember, like, when towards the end, he has the Joker tied up, and he's telling him that, Bruce, I forgive you.
That is something I wanted to bring up, is how emotional that ending actually is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, the actor Jensen Ackles is the one who voices Jason Todd, and, you know, I just love how, you know, yeah, he's kind of arrogant and he's kind of a punk, but you do feel genuinely sorry for what happened to him. And even though we know that Batman can't actually kill the Joker, you know, we fully understand why Jason Todd wants him to, and, you know, we sympathize with his reasoning, you know, because, you know, as John said, he's like, you know, Bruce, I forgive you for not saving me, but why? Why on God's green earth is he still alive? You know, that strikes a chord, you know, especially when he kicks the door open.
The opening scene, like, when you see the Joker, like, beating the shit out of Robin, it's, like, really intense. And, like, when you're, like, seeing, like, Batman, like, rooting for Batman trying to, like, get there on time to save him from the bomb exploding, it was, like, seeing, like, it's like you're watching the comic book come to the screen to life. And, I hope one day they make a Death in the Family. Like, well, I mean, there's rumors about that. I hope it really does happen, because that's like a great comic book storyline of Batman, Death in the Family.
And I just want to mention Wade Williams does a great job voicing Black Mask. He is very entertaining. You could almost make the argument that he's just as, even maybe slightly more so entertaining than the Joker, because I love his tantrums. You know, it's almost like he's an overgrown child, but, you know, he's in the body of this dangerous, you know, mobster. And I love how he's just so abusive to his own henchmen, you know. He's like, when he's discussing how the Band of Four failed to kill the Red Hood, he's like, Band of Four? Punch! Guess they're gonna need a new name. Punch! And I just love his little tirade when he says, what don't you people understand about me? The fact that I want him dead. I want him beaten, broken, his head on my wall, kinda dead!
Don't even know if I brought up my own thoughts on this movie. I think this movie is freaking great.
Yes.
I honestly would hold this right on par with Mask of the Phantasm as one of the best animated Batman films.
If someone asked me which one was better, they're great in both ways. Like, I give them both like A+, and they're just unique. That's the way I describe them.
I just also want to mention, I love the scene where Batman goes to interrogate Ra's al Ghul. And Ra's al Ghul, you know, he tells him the story of how he brought Jason back. And, you know, you can almost see that he does genuinely feel bad for what, you know, the fact that his little crime, well, not little, his big crime resulted in the Joker killing Jason Todd. But, you also kind of see that arrogance of, when Batman says, "You've never shied away from drawing blood," and he says, "True, but always with a purpose." I like how that's still there. Like, he's still dead set on his goal. And Jason Isaacs does a fantastic job voicing him. I want to add that too.
Also, before this film, I had no idea who Black Mask was until this film. I'd like to read it more in comic books and see more on, like, maybe other, like, Batman, just anything, whether Gotham or maybe like other animated movies.
So discuss Neil Patrick Harris as Nightwing. I think he definitely provides a bit of, lightheartedness to this otherwise very dark, but necessarily dark film, which I think is very welcome.
I thought he did a good job. I thought he was a pretty good Nightwing. He amazed me. This is actually the second time he's voiced a comic book character, because he did Spider-Man in 2003, and he did a good job doing Nightwing.
Yeah, and I just love when he says, "Oh, just once can you say, let's get in the car?"
That's funny.
And I also kind of like how when Batman and Nightwing are interrogating Joker at Arkham, he says, "If you're behind this in any way," but the Joker just brushes him off by saying, "Oh, bird brain, you're no fun anymore. All grown up in your big boy pants. Still, better off than his replacement. A lot harder to make with the yucks when you're worm food." And you can tell he's definitely trying to screw with Batman, because he pushes him to the brink, And especially when he says, "You're going to do it this time, or you're just going to put me in another body cast for 6 months." You can tell he wants to push Batman, over the edge,
Yeah.
He's tempting him, and I think they do a great job with that in this movie.
Now we come to 2011's Batman Year One, which is based on the Frank Miller graphic novel of the same name, and is actually a retelling of Batman's origin. And this movie's actually pretty true to the book. It's almost slavishly devoted to the book, I would say. What do you guys think of this movie?
Brought up before about how sometimes adaptations can be bland because they're so committed to the source material, but now that you bring that up, that the fact that it's so straight, it doesn't matter. And I think the reason why is because it's so well cast. Cranston as Gordon, and Dushku as Catwoman, and Ben McKenzie as Batman, who now he's playing Gordon on Gotham. They all they fit into their roles so well, and it's really great to watch. I forget. Katie Sackhoff is Sarah, right?
Yes.
And I loved her from Battlestar Galactica, so that was like a cool treat to see. Everybody fits in their roles very well, and that's what elevates it. Because if it was, I think, just straight up people with less of a presence playing these roles, it would have been like a weaker adaptation. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot just because the actors.
Because it's so devoted to its source material, it's kind of a weak movie for me, because that could also be because, while I do like the graphic novel, it's not one of my favorite Batman comics. So maybe because this is so true to the comic, that's why I find the movie to be kind of bland, honestly. But that's just my opinion. But John, what do you think of this?
Oh, I love it. It's actually, Year One is actually my favorite comic, because I think Frank Miller really nailed it down, the origin of Batman perfectly. One of my favorite scenes is when you see Batman wounded, and he wants to call for help, but he just doesn't want to, because he feels like, I'd rather die of not knowing whether or not I was meant to be something, or die for nothing, not knowing what I could have been, what my destiny was. Could I have been a superhero? And the Bat comes in, he sees the Bat. It's just the music nails it perfectly, because it symbolizes how yes, this is what I'll be. I'll dress as a Bat. This is how I'll put fear into my enemies. And I agree. Bryan Cranston, he's great as Jim Gordon. I wish he could play him again. J.K. Simmons wasn't that bad in Justice League. I just wish, it's early for him. But anyway, Elijah Dushku, I would love to see her play Catwoman in a live action. She'd be perfect. And Ben McKenzie plays Batman. He plays Jim Gordon in Gotham. I find that ironic that he was Batman in this movie, then he played Jim Gordon later in the show.
I think he's actually a huge Batman fan. So I think
Is he? I don't know much about him.
Yeah, he probably. I don't know if they asked him to do it or if he got his way in or something. But then obviously Gotham, he probably also added the thing oh, by the way, I love Batman. So
yeah, I did not know.
that was how he got Gordon, and he's great as Gordon on that show, by the way.
Yeah, I really like this film. I think it's a great way to show how Batman, became Batman. It's pretty entertaining and enjoyable to see Bruce Wayne, go on his journey. And I think Ben McKenzie does a great job. And I agree. It is ironic that he went on to play Commissioner Gordon. I actually had the privilege of meeting him and Morena Baccarin completely by chance. I was
jealous.
Me too.
I was waiting outside this off-Broadway show, for Charlie Cox to come out to sign autographs, and out popped out pops Ben McKenzie and Miranda Baccarin.
Nice.
And I asked, can I get your autographs and can I take a photo with you? And they said, yeah, sure. So that was a nice little surprise that day.
By the way, thanks for finally helping me know how to pronounce her last name. I've been getting that wrong for years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've been saying Baccarin all this time.
Yeah. Wait, how do you say it?
It's Baccarin.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how I assume it's said. I mean,
I think yours is more right because it sounds smoother. So.
Well, you're welcome then. Yeah, and Bryan Cranston, who's just great in everything he does. He does a great job as Commissioner Gordon. I actually I printed out the poster for this movie and actually sent it to him through the mail while he was doing this Broadway show, and he actually signed it and sent it back. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, he really does a good job. You could tell Gordon is just a man struggling to maintain order in this increasingly chaotic place.
And that's actually something I want to bring up. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of the comic, one of the things I do appreciate about this movie and the comic is that really this is more of a Jim Gordon story than a Batman story. I would argue he's really the main character.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Batman, of course, still has a large part to play in this, but yeah, I agree. It is Jim Gordon's character, and I also like some of the supporting characters, especially Flass. He's just one of those bad guys who you can tell he's a bad guy right off the bat, and it's like the guy just oozes, slime, metaphorical sense, like he's corrupt and he's bad to the bone.
And he got a great comeuppance.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he got it when Jim Gordon beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, he's very entertaining, and I also love the character of the corrupt police commissioner Loeb. He's a real piece of work. And of course, Gordon's wife, Barbara, you could tell, I guess you could say she's going through her own struggle because she's pregnant and about to bring this baby into this god-awful place, And of course, her husband cheats on her, which probably also adds a lot of stress. So, you've got all these characters, with basically an internal and outward struggle, and it's very entertaining to see how they deal with it over the course of the film.
And I love that in retrospect, her giving birth to James Jr. If you're familiar with the comics, specifically the Scott Snyder stuff, eventually where that went. So I love that retroactively, like all this stuff became more and more important as time went on. And you could tell that Scott had a great love for the story. So I'm sure he loves the movie too.
One thing I can agree with this definitely does feel like a Jim Gordon film in a way. It's interesting how you see that before Batman and Jim Gordon were trusted each other. Basically, Jim Gordon did not believe in the Batman at first. He thought he was some evil vigilante who was not doing the right thing. But one thing I can agree with, I can understand why you don't like this and the comics, because you feel you're watching the comic book it's the same format but just done with animation and a movie instead of.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like that deal where I feel like because I read the comic, is there really a point in the movie because it's so true to the source material?
Yeah, I just want to say my favorite scene in the movie is, like you, John, is when, he's just gotten back from that fight, and, he's bleeding out, and he's debating, in Wayne Manor, why should I even bother calling Alfred to help patch me up? Right. There's no point. And he's going, how, Father? He's talking to this statue, this bust of his father. And he's saying, how can I make them afraid? And then, almost as if it's some sign sent by his father, the bat crashes through the window and starts, emitting that, high-pitched scream. And it's almost like his father is sending him a message. This is how you make them afraid. And I love that scene. It's my favorite scene in the entire movie.
No, one of my favorite scenes in Batman films, period.
A very interesting thing about that moment, obviously, in comics, they always reinterpret the origin every few years. That is such a well-respected scene that when Scott Snyder did it in Zero Year, it was the exact same thing, just with a technological bent. Right. Instead, it's his dad developed this technology that can hologram an environment around you to do sparring, training, that kind of thing. And he's sitting. It's the exact same thing. He's sitting in the study. He's not bleeding out though, but he's sitting there with the device in his hand, and he goes, "Whatever is on this is the sign of what I am going to become." And he switches it on, and it's a Batcave, and a holographic bat lands on the bust and everything. So it was this cool reinterpretation of it, just from a new technological perspective. And I thought it was really cool that they felt that moment was so iconic. They didn't want to change it too much, but they also wanted to update it. So that just gives you an idea of like the impact of how this story went. You know, what Frank did for it.
Yeah, and I also just want to point out one of the earlier scenes before Bruce gets the idea to become Batman, he's trying to just fight crime as just some, he tries to disguise himself with makeup and a costume and all that, but it's just, as some random average Joe. And, I always hate the part where he's defending this little girl from her pimp, and then the little girl repays him by stabbing him in the leg. It's like, what the hell? That's gratitude? Where's their gratitude? What the hell?
Like a dose of reality type thing. Like you save somebody and then they're not grateful at all.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but it's like, I want to scream to that girl, where's the gratitude? He just saved you. What the hell?
I think it's kind of to show that how broken that girl is now, how lost to that world she is.
Actually, if you think about it, that scene kind of reminded me like a little bit like Taxi Driver when you think about it in a way. Kind of, but it makes you wonder if like maybe Frank Miller was inspired from Taxi Driver. That's in the comics, maybe.
I wouldn't doubt that. Like, year one, it does have this very gritty, almost New York feel, even though it's not New York. But,
Yeah.
I couldn't help but notice that one of the dates is June 5th, and that's when Batman throws Falcone's car into the river, and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm so grateful Batman did that on my birthday. That's just great. I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit.
Now, the next two movies I want to talk about, I actually want to talk about them simultaneously because they're basically a two-part movie. And the next two movies I want to talk about is the two-part animated film, The Dark Knight Returns, based on the Frank Miller graphic novel of the same name, which is actually probably my favorite Batman comic. Like, for me, the top three Batman comics would be Dark Knight Returns, The Killing Joke, and Arkham Asylum, Mysterious House on Sirius Earth. And the comic book, The Dark Knight Returns, was such a revolutionary comic. Like, at least for the mainstream, it's what kind of got Batman to be taken a little more seriously, and kind of led to the Tim Burton Batman film for all intents and purposes. And I would say both that and Alan Moore's Watchmen really did change the comic book field at the time. But I absolutely adore the comic, and I think this two-parter is a fantastic adaptation of the comic. It's extremely true to the comic, but in my opinion, it does water some stuff from the comic down. But what do you think of the comic and this movie?
Oh, the comic, obviously. I mean, you can't even overstate how fantastic it is. The adaptation, like you said, very straight, but I like it a lot, and I think it's the same thing as year one. It helps that they cast really good people. They also do add some scenes, though. Like, I know they added like some scenes about like Harry kind of like training herself and all that stuff. It was a very smart move to make it a two-parter, because that meant that they could put in like all the stuff that was good, and I love that part one ends with that big cliffhanger, the Joker's waking up. You get that feel that, like, okay, shit's gonna go down.
I love when he hears the name Batman on the TV. He's like, the Batman? Darling.
There's, like, this weird, like, yin-yang thing about them. Like, one can't exist without the other, and it's a very strange, very cool relationship between the two of them. And that's the best thing about that story, at least for me, was the exploration of that. I like him in the white suit, too. I don't know why I enjoy that so much. It's kind of like a different way of doing Joker. Michael nails it too, and Ariel was a really unconventional choice for Carrie, but she really killed it. I thought she was a really good choice, and Peter Weller as an old Batman, that makes perfect sense, because in his youth he would have been a fantastic Bruce. So yeah, again, same thing with year one. It benefits from the people that they put in the role.
This is one of my all-time favorite Batman movies. It is epic and action-packed with a great story. I like how Batman is older and grittier, and also more reckless. He's fed up with Gotham City being overrun by criminals, and also fed up with being alive and not doing anything about it. And I like how Bruce treats Batman as something he has to keep down. Like how he mentions how drinking alcohol makes it easier to stay retired. And I love the fights in this movie, like the fight with the mutants and the fight with the Joker and the fight with Superman. They're all very action-packed. They're all very violent and brutal. You feel every punch. You feel every bone break. It's intense. And I also do like, as Chris said, how they explore Batman and the Joker's relationship a little, how it's very symbiotic. The Joker wakes up from his catatonia after when Batman, comes back from his retirement. And, I just love the cast in this movie. I think Peter Weller does a pretty good job. Although, I think some people may take issue with the fact that he doesn't differentiate his voice between Bruce Wayne and Batman, although, I mean, I don't think it's too much of a problem. And I love, how he's also the voice of, his mental Batman when he says, you try to keep me down. The time has come, that's a great scene too. And I just can't say enough good things about Michael Emerson as the Joker. He's definitely a more subtle take on the Joker than I think people are used to, but I like to think of him as kind of like he's perfectly creepy as the Joker. It's a very subtle approach, but very effective. I love how this Joker is like a celebrity, he comes out onto the stage of the Dave Van Cochran show and he's, waving to the crowd. He's basking in his glory. And, he's very manipulative and he has a lust for violence that's constantly brewing. He's like a spring, I really enjoy it.
Just like Year One being my favorite comic, this is probably like my second favorite comic book ever, because it was just the first time I read the comic and saw the film, it introduced me. I think what I like about Frank Miller's stories of Batman is that it introduced me to ways I never thought could be possible with Batman, especially how you see Batman retire and he comes out of retirement because he doesn't like the way Gotham has become, because it's become more worse and dangerous than what he remembers when he first started fighting crime. Also when the Joker manipulates Catwoman, I was oh my god, I was so disturbed just to see that, and also the fight between Batman and Superman, better than Dawn. I'm sorry if I've been going on a rant about that. This is better than Dawn of Justice.
Definitely right.
Yeah.
I will say that the great moments, the fact that it's so close to the source material, the moments about that you can praise, unfortunately it goes to the story, not to the film itself. I love that the Batmobile is now a huge fucking tank. I love that Carrie becoming Robin just happens, it just makes sense. There's no big build up. It's just when he meets her, he just goes, yeah, this is Robin. She's the new Robin. There's no really getting around that. That big final battle between Bruce and Clark, again, that dynamic between them of hope versus fear. It's really cool,
Yeah, and I just want to go back to John's point about the Joker being, manipulative. Yeah. I think that's best shown when he's manipulating his psychiatrist, Dr. Bartholomew Wolper, who's such an egotistical asshole that he's just so susceptible to the Joker's manipulation. It's like he's almost feeding into it. I just love when the Joker is pretending to cry and he goes, but all their hatred, it's so disheartening. And it's clearly so fake, but you can see Dr. Bartholomew Wolper just, falling for it and going, now, don't say that. I always say, hatred never heals.
And this is going on a bit of a tangent, but I thought it'd just be something worth bringing up. The mutants in this, I love that Mad Max style.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say that.
Yeah, that freakiness, and it was always such a cool, weird design with the almost the Battlestar Galactica style glasses and the mohawk, and they actually just showed up on Gotham this season, and they look exactly like they do in the book. They put a lot of care into it, so definitely catch up on that show if you love Dark Knight Returns.
Another thing I love about both this movie and the comic is I look at it as more of a dystopian story than an actual superhero story, because in theory it's supposed to be in sort of either a future or sort of an alternate future or an alternate present. So, and you really see this society falling apart, and Batman is almost the last hope of society, but it's also this is our hope, it's I really look at it as more of a dystopic novel than really a superhero story.
Would you also say that it's got maybe a slight apocalyptic feel to it,
oh yeah.
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 It's not the full-on end of the world, but
No.
things are going to shit.
Yeah.
So the dystopian thing makes sense.
Yeah, and I just want to add on to Bruce being very reckless. It's seen right from the beginning when he's deliberately crashing his race car. And another part I love is when he's walking back home from his meeting with Gordon, and he's in, this bad part of town. The whole part of town is bad, but this part, I guess, especially. And, two mutant gang members approach him, and they're like, oh, we're going to slice and dice. But Bruce doesn't back down, and he clenches his fists, and he's like, come on. And he actually scares them off just by doing that. That just goes to show that he's ready to fight again. He's itching to get back out there. It's like he can't keep it down anymore, and, that's just very entertaining to see.
I forgot to mention this before, that I love Peter Weller as Batman in this film. When I first heard that he was playing Batman, I was a little bit skeptical, but watching him, he's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I think Peter Weller does a great job, and when I met him at Monster Mania back in August, I actually asked him what made him want to take the role of Batman, and he said, "Oh, well, my friend, Heath Ledger was involved in it. They had worked together on this movie called The Order." So, that was why, and he told me about that Heath Ledger was a real nice guy. So, that was pretty cool to hear. Heath Ledger was the reason, because I think he kind of was talking about Heath Ledger out of the blue, I think. So I don't know if necessarily that was, he didn't say that was the reason for me taking the role. He just kind of brought him up, which I still appreciated, of course. I mean, that was a wonderful little tidbit to hear. And I also had the privilege of meeting Michael Emerson when he was doing an off-Broadway show. I got him to sign a few Joker photos, and I added his signature to my copy of Batman the Killing Joke that I'd gotten Kevin Michael Richardson to sign. He was very nice. He's just a great actor in general. I also saw him in Saw when he played Zep Himdall. He's perfectly demented in that.
He's also great in Lost, where he plays Ben.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
Never seen it either.
Yeah, I used to watch Lost all the time. So.
He's like a master conniver, so it's like he's a very he's intimidating, but not in any kind of physical way, more just in the way of this dude has a plan and he's gonna fuck with all of us.
It's a definitely more subtle take on the Joker, but I like to think of this Joker, going back to what I said before, he's like a ticking time bomb. I mean, you can tell from the early moments when he first awakens from his catatonia, he's planning something big. And I just love that scene where his one remaining henchman comes to visit him at Arkham. And, he's telling him to use the filters, and he's like, remember, when you're on stage, only breathe through your nose. And, he just says, and all this time I just held my breath. Really? I could kiss you. There's that, like I said, subtle but very effective. I also love the scene, like you were saying, John, where he comes and just intimidates Selena Kyle. And he forces her to do his bidding, to brainwash the, prostitute who's going with the congressman, I mean, it's such an uncomfortable, cringe-inducing scene to watch. It's
one of the most disturbing things I've seen in, Batman things.
Yep. He forces Selena to kiss him, and, you could see the lips pressing against each other. I mean, it's just horrible. And, of course, he beats the shit out of her afterwards. We see her later tied up with her bruised, bloodied face. It's horrible.
Wearing a Wonder Woman suit.
Yeah, and she even says, Bruce, he's worse than ever.
Do you think that this kind of waters down some of the stuff from the graphic novel a little bit?
Depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Maybe because they felt it would be more palatable if they toned down some stuff. But I think it's equally disturbing, especially Michael's Joker. Yeah, I think they worked pretty well.
You do get a sense of Frank Miller's politics a little bit in the graphic novel, and they kind of downplayed that a little bit for the movie. There's a scene in the graphic novel where a guy goes into a porno theater and shoots it up. Given what happened in real life not too long before this movie came out, I understand why that scene was not in the movie.
I can see why.
I know what you're talking about, yeah. Yeah, and also I want to mention Alfred in this movie. Obviously this is an even older Alfred, and I always find the scene towards the end, where he has to blow up Wayne Manor and, destroy all that history and all the memories. It's just so heartbreaking to watch, especially, when you see it's taking a toll on him. He drops one of the books and he has to struggle to pick it up, and then he struggles to get out of there, and as he's watching it go up in flames, he just suffers such a stroke, and I think it's heartbreaking.
Before we end our discussion on this movie, I do want to bring up the subplot with Two-Face in this, which I thought was really heartbreaking, given that Harvey Dent's my favorite Batman character. What did you think of the Two-Face storyline? I
thought it was really great because, in addition to Harvey's story, I love to see where all these characters went 20 years down the line. I don't know if it made it into the movie. I remember it being in the book. It was offhand references to what happened to the Justice League. It was Diana went back to her people, Hal went to the stars, and it was it gives you this sense that everything kind of just burned out, And with Harvey, it's a whole different thing because that personality subsided, but then it also now it's coming back in a big way. So it's almost things were finally okay for him for a while, and then everything just went right back to shit.
Yeah, I agree. Two-Face's story is pretty, it's tragic, I mean, I think sometimes it gets a little, overshadowed by, the other things going on in the movie, but it's really, it tugs at the heartstrings, you know. And I also want to talk about, you know, Dr. Bartholomew Wolper again, because as with the Joker, you know, he just has deluded himself into thinking that he can actually cure these insane criminals, when really it's just the opposite.
I think you brought up Frank's politics. A lot of something that kept happening through his Daredevil run was criminals keep bringing up the fact that they have rights and that they need to be treated and respected as others. I think Frank's personal opinion is, hey, look, when you commit crimes and you do heinous acts, you've kind of forfeited that part of your life.
I agree.
And I personally, just to speak to my own politics, I think it's bullshit that you can rehabilitate these people. So that speaks to me as a fan and just as a Batman fan. Yeah, I think it's important. Frank kind of went a little fucking nuts the past 10 years, but I agree with him back in the day. Yeah.
Well, the thing with that is, like, I like to think that everybody deserves a second chance, and, like, I would like to see, like, a person who's severely mentally ill get help and be rehabilitated. But then again, it also depends on what they did. Right. Because a child molester, I don't give a shit what happens to a child molester. So like, I guess it depends, you know, but his views, I think, have always been very right-wing, but you do see that in Dark Knight Returns. You've seen it more, obviously, as you said, in the past 10 years, though. Although I will say with Two-Face, he's the one Batman villain who I think really deserves redemption.
I could agree on that.
Yeah, I would agree, because obviously we all know before being Two-Face, he was a successful, you know, district attorney. He was doing good, you know, so to see this happen to him, that's part of his tragic story.
One line from the graphic novel that I'm kind of disappointed they changed for the movie. In the movie, Batman says, "You and me both," them both, like, not being able to change who they are. In the graphic novel, Batman says to Harvey, "I see a reflection." I kind of like that better, like, this idea that they're both very similar, but I felt like him saying "you and me both" kind of downplayed that, or didn't really have the same impact of him saying "you're my reflection, Harvey."
Yeah, I fully agree with that, because Batman has his own demons to struggle with. I think Batman definitely, he wants to help Harvey Dent, you know, whereas obviously with the Joker, I mean, he straight up says there's no problem with the Joker that I can't solve. I can solve any problem with the Joker with my fists. You know, so he takes different approaches to his villains.
So, any closing thoughts on this, on the two-part Dark Knight Returns movie?
Yeah, I want to go into a little bit more about Superman. You know, one thing that I was always touched by this, how even though at the end they were enemies, you know, Superman still has enough respect for Batman to show up to his funeral. I just want to say I love the personality of the mutant leader. You know, he's out so far out there, he doesn't give a fuck, you know. He's just like, we will tear Gotham apart. You know, we will kill Batman and the old man Gordon. You know, he's just going all out there. And, you know, when Batman first shows up to fight him in the tank, he's like, oh, come on out of there. Hey, are you slow, old man? You know, he's got a big personality. I think it would have been real easy for them to just make him this kind of big, dumb, muscle-bound punk, but no, there's some good writing to this character.
I love that language they came up with, that like pseudo slang that they speak, and then like Carrie has to like adapt to it in that one scene.
That's actually very Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. Yeah, I feel like it was a big inspiration. I took a lot of influence from it. Yeah, that's a cool part. Like, just to give you an idea of how much they have their own society.
I never thought of it that way.
Love the movie, love the comic. Read and watch both, so check it out.
Yeah, I mean, and the ending of this movie is very uplifting, where you see that Bruce will continue to be Batman, and not only be Batman, but also train all these other young people into being like him, you know, which is a very heartwarming and uplifting thing to see. Yeah, I would definitely rank this at, quite possibly, at the very top of Batman stories. I mean, It's just such an epic tale. It's got a great cast of characters. It's got amazing action scenes. It's one of the best.
I mean, yeah, it's just iconic. You know, it did so much for Batman. It did so much for comics in general, and it's great that it got such a straight and enjoyable adaptation with such great, you know, actors playing these characters. You can tell a lot of love went into it, and that's like the most important part. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I also want to add on to Superman that I like how he's kind of torn sort of between what he's obligated to do by the authority that employs him, and also just by what I think he secretly knows that Batman's right. Add a little interesting story. I met the actor who voices Dr. Bartholomew Wolper. His name's Michael McKean. One of the photos I brought for him to sign was a photo of Dr. Wolper, the Joker, and Dave Endocrine, when they're on the talk show, that I'd gotten signed by Michael Emerson, and he sees that, and he just goes, all right, wise guy, who am I playing here? And he was probably, testing me to make sure I was an actual fan instead of, just getting it signed so I could sell. And I said, oh, Dr. Bartholomew Wolper. And I told him how I remembered him saying that he's a good psychiatrist, if you ask him. And he told me he is, although a bit unorthodox.
So that's it for part 2. Part 3 of this retrospective will be coming soon.